So this is video segment 3. You learned in video segment 2 that the board approved a draft of the mission, vision, challenges, and student learning target. So the next step in the process is to go ahead and develop the strategies. So what strategies does the school district design, deploy, or improve to meet or exceed the mission, vision, challenges, and student learning targets that were identified in the plan? So what is the definition of a strategy? A strategy, we learned, was the how. So it's what gets you to where it is you want to go. It's the how, it's action-oriented, it's critically important to a strategic planning team because the strategies are going to help achieve the mission and the vision and address the student learning targets as well as the challenges. So UE talks about in the strategy development process, it begins with the SWOT. And remember, you are going to conduct a SWOT probably by the educational experts, where you have perhaps formed a subcommittee of educational practitioners who are responsible for developing strategies for each student learning target or measurable objective in the CSIP that we call as objectives in the CSIP. So the SWOT analysis is going to help you identify the strengths, the weaknesses, and the opportunities and the threats. So this is language from your book where you'll use information from stakeholder survey, the internal performance review, and the draft strategic plan to answer these particular SWOT questions. And so each of your committees who are responsible for each of the student learning targets can do a SWOT analysis. And I think all of you are familiar with that and have used SWOT analysis in your work as practitioners. So here are questions that go along with each of the strengths and the weaknesses. And so we won't read each of these because I know all of you can read these particular questions on this particular slide. And here are questions that go along with opportunities and threats. In Columbia's process, I remember each of the strategy committees did do a SWOT analysis that helped them identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So answers to those SWOT questions helps the team decide on the student learning target strategies. And UE takes it further. You know, we develop strategies, all of us have developed strategies to go along with each of our measurable objectives on our CSIP plans. But UE takes it a step further and identifies what he calls strategy maps. So a strategy map is a blueprint that administrators use to define the strategies that will cause the mission to be accomplished. And what's different from strategy maps from just strategies is that strategy maps show the interrelationships between all the strategies. And I don't know about your CSIP planning processes, but in Columbia, we had committees working in isolation from one another, developing those strategies aligned to each of the objectives. So it was very difficult because those committees were working in silos. It was difficult for us to show the interrelationship between those strategies. In fact, many of the committees that were working, for instance, we had a student performance committee, we had a professional development committee working on strategies. Many of those strategies were common to one another, and so there were duplicates. So it was my job as a CSIP facilitator to go through each of those committees' work to eliminate the duplications or identify any gaps that perhaps the committees had not identified. So strategy maps, I think, would be a useful tool. If I were to be a facilitator again, I would consider using strategy maps to show a better picture of those interrelationships between strategies. That helps us be more efficient, effective, and innovative. It helps us to determine what current strategies are working well and what new strategies will be needed to improve student performance across the district. In your book, this is just an example that is given of a strategy map used in organizations. So in organizations, I guess, if you will, these are kind of the big rocks or the big areas that an organization would identify strategies for. So in an organization, it really starts with learning and growth of the organization that helps them develop internal processes to better serve the customer that would lead to better financial outcomes. So that's what a strategy map or would kind of look like with a business organization. Let's compare and contrast that to see what a strategy map might look like in education. Oh, before we go there, here's an example of a good and bad strategy maps. And so these are organization examples of strategy maps. It's a hyperlink that will take you to a video. So really an example of a bad strategy map, and we'll just kind of go back to this. There would be no interrelationship at all between these strategies that basically lead an organization to a better financial outcome, mainly because these strategies were probably developed in isolation. So take a look at these videos to see examples of good and bad strategy maps. I'm sorry, I said that I would go to an educational strategy map, but let's take a look at this business strategy map. Here you can see the interrelationships between all of these strategies. So here's the alignment between the objectives, the measures, the targets, and the various initiatives that lead to profitability in this particular company. So the red arrows are meant to indicate the relationship between all of these strategies. So here's an example of UE strategy map used in education, and it's really kind of formed around the Baldrige model. So in a school district has fiscal responsibility to put in place support systems for students and employees, as well as developing employees so that they can better educate students. And so that leads to stakeholder satisfaction, which leads to student learning outcomes at a high level. Baldrige is always about implementing things at a high level and the outcomes being achieved at a high level. So there are interrelationships. All of these things are developed together, not in isolation, so that when we create a strategy map, you'll be able to see the relationship between the strategies of all of these areas that are leading to high student learning. Here's an example of an education strategy map, and I'll pass these out in class next week, but take time to study this and see what you think. Again, the arrows are meant to show that there is a relationship between all of the strategies that leads to high student learning. So see what you think about that and see if you think that would be something that would be helpful to your district as they enter into a strategic planning process. Will you take strategies a step further and develop them so that they are interrelated to one another? Your strategy map might look like this. I'm not sure if I would do this again as a CSEP facilitator. My strategy map would look like UE's, but I certainly would consider developing those strategies with each of these big areas in concert with one another instead of doing them separately, so that hopefully the ultimate outcome would be high student learning or improved student learning as compared to the past. So this ends this video segment 3, and our next video segment, our fourth one, will be on the balanced scorecard.